Today I'm bringing you a book by Samuel Huntington called Who Are We? Huntington's Who Are We centers on the concept of identity, specifically American national identity. So what exactly constitutes American identity? On this question, there are three theories. The first is called the melting pot theory, which suggests America is like a large cauldron where immigrants from all directions come together, their cultures collide, they intermarry, and eventually melt into a new American identity. It's similar to splattering various paints, red, yellow, blue, green, onto a palette. Eventually, all individual colors disappear and blend into a dark, soy sauce-like color. The second theory is the salad bowl theory. As the name implies, tomatoes remain tomatoes, cabbage remains cabbage, and each race and ethnicity maintains its distinctive characteristics, just lightly dressed with salad dressing. This dressing represents shared commitment to the Constitution, separation of powers, democratic elections, and other fundamental political institutions. The cultural pluralism and ethnic diversity that the Democratic Party constantly champions is essentially this concept. Huntington disagrees with both theories. Instead, he supports what's called the tomato soup theory. What does this mean? It suggests that the British made a pot tomato soup, then Italians arrived and added an egg, the Irish contributed a spoonful of cream, the Chinese threw in 3 potatoes, and Koreans sneaked in 2 small dishes of kimchi. While this soup became richer in content and changed in taste, it fundamentally remained tomato soup. In other words, its essential nature hasn't changed. This tomato soup theory reminds me of Hayek. He classified order into 2 types, primary order and secondary order. Hayek believed that secondary order not only emerges from primary order, but is also strongly constrained by it during evolution. Cultural geographer Wilbur Zelinsky also proposed a first effective settlement theory. This theory suggests that in newly established societies, the first group of settlers, regardless of their number, their characteristics and rules they establish would have decisive influence on the society's future direction. You see, Zelinsky and Hayek essentially share the same perspective. Now, let's discuss this tomato soup theory in detail. Huntington begins by clarifying a concept. Franklin Roosevelt once said, "Remember, always remember, all of us are descended from immigrants." Huntington argues that Roosevelt's statement is incorrect. How is it wrong? Because immigrants are people who join an existing society. If Robinson Crusoe drifted to a deserted island, calling him an immigrant to that island would be absurd. Landing on an uninhabited island and settling there is called settlement. Similarly, the British who landed in Boston on the Mayflower in 1620, although they encountered Native Americans, didn't join Native American society. Instead, through purchasing and seizing land, they drove away the Native Americans and established settlements in the wilderness. Therefore, these people shouldn't be called immigrants, but settlers, just like Robinson Crusoe. The original tomato soup was made by these settlers. This necessitates a timeline. Those who came before a certain point are settlers. Those who came after are immigrants. How do we determine this point? Simple. The word immigrant appeared in English shortly after America's founding, so we can roughly divide it this way. Those who came before the country's founding in 1776 are settlers. Those who came afterward are immigrants. This addresses the first issue. Those who made the tomato soup were the people who arrived in North America before the nation's founding. They are the creators of what Hayek called primary rules and the first effective settlers in Zelinsky's theory. These settlers determined the core elements of American identity. So, who were these pre-independence arrivals to America? Just as Indian Muslims who were unhappy split off to form Pakistan, or Jews uncomfortable living under others established Israel, America was similarly a product of religious conflict. Puritans unhappy in Europe sailed across the ocean to establish colonies in North America. The famous British thinker Edmund Burke said, "The colonists who went to America were Protestants, but that kind most opposed to quiet submission to the opinions and will of others. All Protestants, even the most calm and passive, are dissenters. But the religion prevalent in our North American colonies is a refinement of the principle of resistance. It is a dissidence of dissent and the Protestantism of the Protestant religion." When America was founded in 1776, there were approximately 3 million white people. These 3 million whites constituted the We the People that opens the Constitution, the tomatoes in the tomato soup. These 3 million whites were highly homogeneous. As mentioned, America resulted from religious conflict and Protestants' persecution in Europe. Unsurprisingly, 98% of these original settlers were Protestants. Additionally, with initially few people, America welcomed any white person. However, 100 years after independence, as America grew more established and more Europeans migrated there, America became more selective. Beginning in 1880, Congress restricted immigration quotas to no more than 150,000 people annually. Of this, 82% was allocated to Northern and Western Europeans, while Latinos, Slavs, and Irish, though also white, received only 16%, with restrictions based on both religion and ethnicity. The proportion of Anglo-Saxon Protestants among early American settlers was extremely high. These people were abbreviated as WASPs, White Anglo-Saxon Protestants. John Jay, America's first Supreme Court Chief Justice, said, "Providence has been pleased to give this one connected country to one united people, a people descended from the same ancestors, speaking the same language, professing the same religion, attached to the same principles of government, very similar in their manners and customs." The original settlers who determined the core of American identity were 3 million WASPs. The final question: what characteristics did these WASPs determine? What kind of identity did they form for Americans? This question has both religious and secular dimensions. On the religious level, which I'll discuss in more detail when covering Russell Kirk's The Roots of American Order, Protestant doctrine provided the greatest foundation for America's social order. America remains at its core a religious nation. A 2003 survey showed that 92% of Americans believe in God, with 60% being Protestant, though significantly lower than the 98% Protestant population during the founding period. It's still the highest percentage among all modernized countries. Unsurprisingly, American values like freedom, equality, work as virtue, and personal responsibility for one's actions are all inherent in Protestant doctrine. So what secular characteristics or identity elements did WASPs contribute to American identity? The answer lies in the Anglo-Saxon heritage. Early British immigrants to America displayed similar passion for British traditions. In the original 13 colonies, land ownership systems, farming styles, governmental structures, literature, customs, prayers, everything followed English patterns. Moreover, Americans not only completely inherited the British judicial system, but also distilled the basic rights of free individuals from British tradition into writing. This became the content of the first 10 amendments to the U.S. Constitution. In conclusion, Huntington's tomato soup theory suggests that American characteristics or identity were bestowed by the earliest 3 million WASP settlers. This derives from two aspects: Protestant doctrine and British tradition. So, how did these Protestant elements and British elements become American characteristics? In other words, how did these ideas and concepts become indigenized in America?